Archaeologists just unearthed a collection of sealed clay jars deep in the sands of Iraq. But inside, they didn't find gold, coins, or ancient prayers. They found deformed wax dolls pierced with wooden pins. This isn't a myth. This is the physical evidence of the Kišpu, a banned underground dark magic so terrifying that it literally paralyzed the greatest empire of the ancient world. Caused such widespread hysteria in ancient Babylon that the legendary King Hammurabi had to invent one of history's most brutal death penalties, the river Ordeal, just to wipe these sorcerers out. Forget the gods and temples. Today, we are opening the forbidden Maqlu tablets to reveal what these warlocks actually did in the dead of night. And the most disturbing part? Modern science suggests their curses actually worked. Part 1. The spiritual warfare of Babylon. To understand why the Kišpu was so terrifying, you have to completely erase your modern view of the world. Imagine living in a society where absolutely nothing happens by accident. You get a sudden migraine, a demon is gripping your skull, your crops fail, an evil spirit has cursed your fields, your child falls ill in the middle of the night. Someone somewhere has sent a shadow to your door. In ancient Babylon, the cradle of civilization, the supernatural wasn't just a belief, it was absolute reality. It was an invisible war zone, and every single citizen was a potential casualty. Because of this constant dread, the Babylonians had an entire state-sponsored division of elite priests known as the Ashapu. Think of the Ashapu as ancient supernatural detectives or sanctioned white mages. If you believed you were cursed, you went to an Ashapu. They would perform elaborate cleansings rituals, prescribe herbal remedies, and recite powerful incantations to drive the darkness away. They were respected, highly paid, and deeply embedded in the government. But where there is light, there is always a shadow, operating in the dead of night, hidden in the labyrinthine alleys of the city were the Kasapu and Kasaptu, the warlocks and witches of Babylon. These were the practitioners of the Kišpu, the banned magic. They didn't worship the state gods, and they didn't operate in the temples. Instead, they dealt in curses, hexes, and the manipulation of demonic forces to exact revenge, ruin rivals, or simply spread chaos for a price. The fear they instilled in the general population was absolute. It wasn't a fairy tale fear. It was a visceral, suffocating terror. Part 2. The Maqlu tablets and the mechanics of terror. So what exactly were these dark sorcerers doing that made the most powerful empire on Earth tremble? The answer lies in a series of ancient texts discovered by archaeologists known as the Maqlu, which literally translates to burning. The Maqlu isn't a spell book for witches. It's actually a desperate, frantic manual of counter magic, an ancient exorcism guide designed to destroy the Kasapu. And by reading the Maqlu, modern historians finally saw exactly what the black magic rituals looked like. It was psychological and spiritual warfare of the highest order. The Kasapu would create effigies of their victims, just like the ones found in those clay jars. They would mix dirt from a graveyard, animal blood, and sometimes even hair or fingernail clippings stolen from the victim. They would mold these materials into a small doll. But they didn't just stab the dolls and call it a day. The rituals were incredibly precise and horrifyingly cruel. According to the tablets, a warlock might take the wax figure of their target and slowly melt it over a fire while chanting their name, believing that as the wax dripped away, the victim's life force would literally melt out of their body. Sometimes they would take the effigy, place it in a miniature coffin, and bury it in an actual cemetery at midnight. The belief was that the spirits of the dead would see the buried figure, assume the victim was already one of them, and drag their soul down to the underworld. The realm of Ereshkigal, a place of dust and darkness from which no one returns. But perhaps the most feared weapon in the warlock's arsenal was the evil eye. The Babylonians believed that a true kasapu didn't even need a ritual to curse you. If they harbored enough malice, all they had to do was look at you. A single, hateful glare in the marketplace could supposedly curdle the milk in a mother's breast, strike a strong man down with a fever, or cause a pregnant woman to miscarry. It was an invisible poison. Imagine the paranoia. Your neighbor gives you a strange look, and the next day you wake up with a terrible cough. Did you catch a cold, or were you marked for death? In Babylon, it was almost always assumed to be the latter. Terror of the Kišpu was spreading like a plague. Society was on the verge of collapsing under the weight of its own paranoia. People were accusing their neighbors, families were tearing each other apart, and the state-sanctioned priests were losing control. The situation became so dire, so completely unmanageable, that the king himself had to step in. And this wasn't just any king. This was Hammurabi, the legendary ruler, who created one of the first written codes of law in human history. Hammurabi realized that if he didn't eradicate this banned magic, his empire would tear itself apart from the inside. How do you put an invisible crime on trial? How do you prove that someone gave you the evil eye or buried a doll in the dead of night? The answer Hammurabi came up with was so extreme and so unimaginably brutal that it would echo through history for thousands of years. It involved dragging the accused out of their homes and throwing them into the raging currents of the Euphrates River. But we'll get into the horrifying reality of the river ordeal and the shocking modern science of why these curses actually worked in just a moment. Part 3, The Wrath of Hammurabi and the River Ordeal King Hammurabi, is famous today for his brutal but foundational concept of justice. An eye for an eye, a tooth for a tooth. But if you actually read the Code of Hammurabi, written on a massive diorite stele over 700 years ago, the very first laws aren't about murder or theft. Law number 2 is entirely dedicated to the kasapu and their banned magic. It reads, "If anyone bring an accusation of sorcery against a man, the accused shall leap into the river." This was the infamous river ordeal. The Babylonians believed that the Euphrates River was not just a body of water, but a living god of judgment. If you were accused of placing a hex on your neighbor or using the evil eye, you were dragged out of your home, stripped and forced to throw yourself into the raging, treacherous currents of the river. If you sank and drowned, it meant the river god had judged you guilty of practicing the Kišpu. Your property would be immediately given to the person who accused you. But if you managed to survive and swim to the shore, you were deemed innocent. The punishment for a false accusation? The accuser would be instantly put to death, and the survivor would take all of their property. Think about the absolute chaos this caused. People were essentially weaponizing the justice system. If your crops failed and your neighbors flourished, all it took was a whisper to the authorities that they had buried a wax doll near your field. The next morning, one of you was going to die. But why was Hammurabi, a king known for creating structured civilization, so obsessed with magic that he made it a capital offense? Kings usually don't write laws to fight imaginary enemies. They write laws to stop real threats. And that leads us to the most terrifying revelation of all. Hammurabi had to stop the kasapu because their magic was actually working. Part 4. The scientific truth. The Nocebo Effect people in ancient Babylon were genuinely dropping dead from curses. But it wasn't demons pulling them into the underworld. It was something far more dangerous, something that exists inside you right now. To understand how a Babylonian warlock actually killed his victims, we have to look at modern neuroscience and a phenomenon known as the Nocebo Effect. You've heard of the placebo effect, where a patient takes a sugar pill, believes it's medicine, and their body miraculously heals itself. The nocebo effect is its evil twin. If your brain truly deeply believes that you have been poisoned or cursed or doomed, it will physically shut your body down. In modern medicine, this is documented as psychogenic death or voodoo death. When a human being is subjected to absolute, inescapable terror, the brain triggers a massive, overwhelming surge of adrenaline and stress hormones. The nervous system goes into overdrive. The blood vessels constrict violently. The heart begins to palpitate out of control, leading to a catastrophic drop in blood pressure and ultimately a fatal heart attack. You literally die of fright. Now, place this modern science back into the dirt streets of ancient Babylon. Imagine you live in a world where you absolutely know, without a shadow of a doubt, that magic is real. One morning, you find a deformed wax doll bound in ropes buried at your doorstep. You know what it means. You know the Kišpu have targeted you. The terror you would feel wouldn't just be a psychological discomfort. It would be a biological weapon. Your heart would race. You would stop eating. Your immune system would crash from the immense stress. And within days, you would waste away, fulfilling the exact prophecy of the curse. The warlock didn't need real magic. They just needed you to believe in it. And the Kišpu weren't just relying on psychology. Modern archaeological analysis of these ancient cultures reveals that many witches and warlocks were highly skilled botanists. If the fear didn't kill you, the Kišpu might slip a lethal dose of heavy metals or toxic plant extracts like belladonna into your food or water. To the untrained eye of a Babylonian citizen, the sudden agonizing cramps and foaming at the mouth weren't the result of a neurotoxin. It was a demon tearing its way out of the victim's stomach. The Code of Hammurabi didn't eradicate the dark magic, it just forced it deeper underground. The Maqlu tablets, the bizarre wax dolls, and the terrifying incantations of the ancient warlocks were buried beneath the sands of time as the empire fell, waiting in the darkness. Today, those very same tablets are sitting behind glass in modern museums across the world. The texts have been translated. The rituals are fully documented. The words that once caused entire cities to descend into paranoia can be read by anyone. And while we like to think that our modern society is immune to such ancient superstitions, remember the nocebo effect. Your brain is wired the exact same way as a Babylonian peasant from 3,000 years ago. If the right seed of fear is planted deep enough in your mind, could a curse still kill you today? If you found this descent into the dark history of Babylon as fascinating as I did, hit that subscribe button. And I want to know your thoughts down in the comments. Do you think the Kišpu were just ancient toxicologists exploiting human psychology? Or is there something in the shadows that science still hasn't explained? Stay curious, stay cautious, and I'll see you in the next mystery.